Hello, all you weirdos. Jim here to talk about Batman number 138, part 4 of the Gotham War. And everybody's enjoying the Gotham War, right? It really is a war as Chip Zdarsky and Teenie Howard battle it out with my patience and sanity with a story that was flawed from the very first page. But what does that really matter? In this issue, we seem to throw away the basic bitch premise of Catwoman's war on crime to deconstruct Batman even more and bring in Vandal Savage, who wants to make a League of Shadows, even though there's already a League of Shadows and they themselves are a newer version of the League of Shadows. And seriously, if this story turns into an East Coast, West Coast branding war, it might actually be better. So let's get into this.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Batman number 138 is written by Chip Zdarsky with art by Jorge Jimenez. Now, everything that I'm about to bitch and moan about has nothing at all to do with the art. Jorge Jimenez's art is excellent. It's the best thing about this issue, maybe the only good thing about the issue. It seems that Chip and Teenie have watched the Fast and Furious movies because the Gotham War really is all about family. It's one of the things that DC has been promising for years, and it's good to see it happening in the main Batman book. Except that I'm not talking about the Bat family. Seriously, the Bat family is a total shit show. But hey, isn't it awesome to get Vandal Savage and his daughter Scandal back together again, figuring out ways to take over the world? Vandal Savage's recent history has been a bit convoluted and odd. He was killed by Lex Luthor in Scott Snyder's Metal, came back with Death Metal, was part of the Totality team in Infinite Frontier, and hey, does anybody remember the Totality team? And seriously, does anybody really remember Infinite Frontier? I didn't think so, but like so many other characters at DC Comics lately, we are going to go basic. I guess DC would call that classic, but here we go. We're getting classic Vandal Savage here because Zdarsky gets readers up to speed. Caveman, Meteor, Ra's al Ghul, Lazarus Pits, and away we go. So what is up with Batman and the Bat family? Well, in Catwoman number 57, Batman said he did something to Jason Todd he wasn't proud of. I don't know. He actually seems kind of proud with himself here as he half explains that he essentially has turned Jason into another Jason. But the opposite. He's the opposite of Jason Statham in Crank. Yep, he reverse cranked Jason Todd. Who saw that coming? You see, if Jason Todd's adrenaline spikes, his fear kicks in, and he has to calm down. It really sounds like when my wife made me get on Zoloft, which ended up making me a zombie, but that's a side story. Batman's theory here is that this will stop Jason from being a bad boy, and this essentially will put him in a timeout. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It makes little sense, and it just keeps showing you how sus Batman is, but in a forced way. It feels like at this point, Chip Zdarsky has to really figure out something that Batman crosses the line with so that everybody can remain mad at him, because really the idea of teaming up with Catwoman and her gang of criminals to do nonviolent crimes is so complete bullshit that you need something else for them to get mad at when they end up fighting Batman. And of course, they will end up fighting Batman. But before we get into that, if you end up kind of sifting through the nonsense here, you do have a couple interesting ideas. They're interesting, but way overdone at this point and very cliche. Now, I don't know what Chip Zdarsky's whole deal is, but really his whole run so far has been grabbing ideas from, say, a Grant Morrison, in this issue, a bit of Scott Snyder even, and trying to play them in a new way, but it just ends up feeling like he's just trying to hide that he's telling the same old stories, because these interesting things, say like Zoran R. of the Mind trying to convince Batman that the Bat family makes him weak. You know, like the Joker has done and said a trillion times before. Also, you get Bruce Wayne wanting his kids to have a normal life, which they obviously can't have with him being a soldier for Batman. Again, this is something that isn't really new at all, but I will say that reverse cranking Jason on fear-inducing Zoloft is a bold new play. Now, while this is all going on, Dick Grayson and Tim Drake beat the shit out of Damian, fight Batman, and turn off his bat box. And please don't get that upset. In this case, Batbox is not a nickname for Catwoman. No, the Batbox is a callback to Scott Snyder's Batman run, though this is a bit different than the ones introduced way back in the New 52 and Batman number 12. Snyder used the Batboxes as a way to explain how Batman secretly powers up the Batcave and keeps security cameras from capturing his image. But here, it just feels like a mainframe where every single thing that Batman needs is stored. That's not very smart. That's not very Batman-esque, and it seems that the hero who prepares for everything has never actually heard of the cloud. The issue then continues with Scandal Savage realizing that Jason Todd is damaged goods, Catwoman telling a sad Batman they need to talk, Damian crying that Batman left them behind after subduing Dick and Tim, and Vandal Savage revealing this grand plan of his. And I'm not sure that Zdarsky realizes that Ra's al Ghul is actually alive right now. Shout out to my gal Flatline who brought him back in Lazarus Planet Next Evolution number 1. But seriously, you can't fault anyone who didn't read the Lazarus Planet event, right? But Vandal's big plan is to turn Catwoman's gang of bumbling henchmen into his own League of Shadows. And seriously, I was praying that, say, Lady Shiva, Talia al Ghul, the leaders of the actual League of Shadows show up and straight up murder everybody in this room. Now, I already told you I love the art, but this issue continues the unnecessary deconstruction of Batman, the unnecessary ripping apart of the Bat family, and while we are only on the 4th part of the Gotham War, it feels like Zdarsky is losing his grip on the overall story anyway, and how could you blame him? It's been a bunch of hooey from the start. To me, this whole thing feels as if Zdarsky, Teeny, and the DC editorial had come up with this idea of a new status quo for Batman and the Bat family and are now winging it to get there. Unfortunately, they are doing it in such a convoluted and forced way with out-of-character nonsense and eye-rolling concepts that fail with even the slightest bit of scrutiny. Because of all that, I'm going to give this issue a 3.5 out of 10 because, I said I really like the art. So let me know what you all thought of this issue in the comments below. And if you want a more in-depth review of this and most of this week's DC comics that came out, make sure to subscribe to the Weird Science DC Comics podcast. And while you're at it, why wouldn't you then subscribe to the Weird Science Marvel Comics podcast and the plethora of manga podcasts we do each and every week? You can easily find them out by searching Weird Science Comics wherever you listen to podcasts, or click on the link tree that we have in the description of this video, and away you go. But thanks, everybody, and I'll catch you weirdos later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.